Are you struggling to speak English, even after studying hard? You are not alone. If English conversations leave you frozen, the problem isn't your grammar, it's your listening. Welcome to a channel where we don't just learn English, we live it. Let's train your ears, unlock your confidence, and finally speak English easily. Listening is not just a part of language learning. It's the foundation. It's the doorway to speaking, understanding, and even thinking in English. Imagine trying to grow a tree without watering it. That's what it's like to try speaking English without listening. You can memorize all the grammar you want, but without real input, without hearing how English sounds, flows, and lives, you will always stuck. That's why listening is not just helpful. It's essential. Think about how babies learn to speak. They don't open grammar books or study verb tenses. They don't practice pronunciation. They just listen. For months, sometimes years, they absorb language without saying a word. They listen to their parents, to songs, to the sounds around them. And one day, without warning, they speak. They don't speak perfectly, but they speak naturally. This is the most powerful way to learn a language. When you listen to English, you are not only hearing words. You are training your ears to recognize rhythm, tone, and melody. You are learning how sentences rise and fall, how people express emotion through their voice, and how the same word can mean something completely different, depending on how it's said. This is something textbook cannot teach you, but listening can. Because English is not just a system of rules, it's a living. And you can only connect with it by opening your ears and letting it in. One of the most beautiful things about listening is that it helps you learn without pressure. You don't need to respond. You don't need to worry about making mistakes. You can just sit back, relax, and let the language flow into your mind. Even if you don't understand everything, your brain is learning. It's picking up patterns. It's recognizing words. It's connecting meanings with sounds. And little by little, day by day, English becomes a part of you. Another powerful benefit of listening is, it gives you real English. In school, you might learn phrases like, I would like to go to the library. But when you listen to native speakers, you hear real expressions like, I am heading out to the library, or, I think I will swing by the library later. These are the phrases people actually use in everyday life. They sound natural, relaxed, and fluent. And the more you listen, the more you start to use these expressions yourself automatically. Listening also teaches you pronunciation in a way nothing else can. English has many words that don't sound the way they are spelled. For example, the word Wednesday sounds like Wednesday. If you only read these words, you might say them incorrectly. But when you hear them often, your brain adjusts. You start to say them the right way, without even trying. This makes your speaking clearer, more confident, and easier to understand. Let's talk about vocabulary. Most people try to memorize word lists. But this method is dry and difficult. You forget what you memorize. But when you hear a word in a real story, in a funny podcast, or in an emotional moment in a movie, that word sticks. You understand it in context. You remember how it feels. You learn not just the word, but how to use it. And when that same word comes up again, it feels familiar. That's how real vocabulary growth, through exposure, not through repetition. Listening also helps you learn grammar naturally. Think about it. You never studied grammar as a baby, but you learned to say things like, I am hungry, or he is sleeping, without needing to understand present continuous tense. The same is possible in English. When you hear correct grammar again and again, your brain starts to recognize what sounds right. You begin to say things like, I have been working all day, not because you studied the present perfect continuous, but because it feels natural. That's the power of listening. It teaches you grammar by sound, not by rules. Now let's be honest. At the beginning, listening can be hard. Native speakers speak fast. They use slang. They mix accents. And yes, you will miss words. You will get confused. You will feel frustrated. But here's the good news, you don't need to understand everything. You just need to understand the message. If someone says, I missed the train, grabbed a quick coffee, and ran to work, you might miss a few details. But your brain can still understand the story. And with practice, you will catch more and more. It's a process. And every minute you listen, your brain is growing stronger. To make listening a habit, start small. You don't need hours. Begin with 10 minutes a day. Listen while brushing your teeth, while cooking and while walking. Play an English podcast in the background. Watch a video on YouTube. Listen to English music. Make it part of your daily life. And always remember, consistency is everything. 10 minutes every day is better than 2 hours once a week. It's the daily exposure that trains your brain. Just like muscles grow with daily exercise, your language skills grow with daily listening. Also, try listening to different accents. At first, this can be confusing. American English sounds different from British English. Australian English has its own style. Indian speakers have their own rhythm. But this diversity is actually good for you. It trains your ears. It helps you adapt. It makes you ready for the real world, where not everyone sounds the same. Don't fear accents. Embrace them. Listen, learn, and grow through them. One important thing is shadowing. Shadowing means listening to a sentence and repeating it immediately, like an echo. It helps you match pronunciation, speed, and intonation. You hear it, then you say it. It's one of the best ways to improve your speaking through listening. And the best part, you don't need a teacher. Just a voice, a sentence, and your attention. In the end, listening is not just about English. It's about connection. When you listen, you hear emotions. You hear stories. You feel what others feel. You begin to understand not just the words, but the people behind them. You laugh with them. You feel their struggles. You become part of their world. That's the real goal of language, not perfection, but connection. So if you are feeling stuck, if speaking is hard, if you don't know where to begin, start with your ears. Just listen, again and again. Make English your background music. Let it live in your world. And slowly, you will find yourself understanding more, speaking more, and feeling more confident. Because listening is not just a skill. It's a superpower. And it's yours. If you choose to use it. Now that you understand the power of listening in learning English, let me share a true-to-life, emotional story that will inspire you to never give up. It's the story of a man named Lucas, who went from being afraid to speak, to finding his voice through the simple act of listening every day. So sit back, relax, and let this story remind you what's possible when you truly listen, not just with your ears, but with your heart. Lucas was a quiet man from the Czech Republic. At 32, he had never dreamed of leaving his hometown. He worked at a local train station, checking tickets, keeping things in order. Life was simple and safe, but deep inside, Lucas always carried a small wish, a quiet dream that he had never told anyone. He wanted to travel, not just to see places, but to meet people. To sit in a cafe in London and chat with a stranger. To laugh with new friends in New York. To hear stories from the world and tell his own. But there was one problem. The barrier of English language. Lucas had studied it in school, of course. But like many others, he had learned with textbooks and tests. He could read signs. He could write simple sentences. But when someone spoke to him in English, his mind froze. The words sounded too fast, too strange, too impossible. So he stayed silent. He stayed small. Until something unexpected happened. One winter morning, Lucas's younger sister came home from university with a small gift. It was an old pair of wireless earbuds. "Try this," she said, handing him her phone with an English podcast playing. "It's not a lesson, it's a story. Just listen." Lucas smiled politely, but that night, alone in his room, he put on the earbuds. He heard a man telling a story about growing up in Ireland. The voice was soft, calm, and full of emotion. Lucas didn't understand every word. Not even half. But something about it felt comforting. So he listened again, and again, and again. Something changed inside him. The next day, he played another podcast on the train to work. Then an English cooking video, while making lunch. Soon, English voices became part of his daily life, background music to his routines. He didn't study them, he just listened. Weeks passed. Lucas didn't tell anyone what he was doing. But every night, as he closed his eyes, he replayed those voices in his mind. Stories of people from around the world. Accents he had never heard before. Laughter, pain and joy. Little by little, the fear started to fade. One day at work, a lost tourist approached him. "Excuse me," she said in English, "do you know where platform 4 is?" Lucas opened his mouth. He expected the usual panic. But it didn't come. He smiled and said, slowly, "Yes, straight ahead," then left. The tourist smiled back. "Thank you." Lucas nodded. "You are welcome." It was only one sentence. But it meant everything. That night, Lucas didn't just listen. He repeated. He paused podcasts and shadowed the voices. He mimicked the rhythm, the tone and the flow. It wasn't easy, but it felt real. It felt alive. 6 months later, Lucas did something no one expected. He booked a solo trip to Ireland. His hands were shaking when he bought the ticket. But his heart was full of quiet courage. When he arrived, he stayed at a small hostel by the coast. At breakfast, people were chatting in English. Lucas listened quietly. Then someone turned to him and said, "Where are you from?" Lucas paused. Then he spoke. "I am from Czech Republic. First time in Ireland." The words came slowly, but they came. Soon, he was telling his name, his story, his favorite foods. He laughed, listened, answered, and though he made mistakes, no one minded. Because he was there. He was speaking. He was living the dream he once thought was impossible. On his last day in Ireland, Lucas sat on a cliff, looking at the waves. His earbuds were in. A familiar podcast played in the background. He thought about how far he had come, not just in language, but in life. He remembered the fear, the silence, the small life. Now, he was part of a bigger world. Not because he was perfect, but because he had listened, every single day, until English was no longer a stranger. It was a friend, a companion in a bridge. Lucas's story is not just his, it can be yours too. Every great English speaker once started as a quiet listener. So if you ever feel stuck or small, remember, one day, one word, one voice at a time, you can grow. You can speak and you can shine. Keep listening, keep believing, and never stop learning.